It's my honor and privilege to serve as the superintendent of Lindbergh Schools. I want to thank our candidates this evening for providing us some time to get to know them better, as well as to why each of them are running for the Board of Education. Being a board member can be a really rewarding experience. Also, at times, it can be a thankless experience as well. Lots of hours, time commitment. It's a voluntary position, so I just want to thank the four of them for being willing to serve our amazing students, our wonderful teachers and staff, our great parents, our community as a whole. So just thank you guys for willing to serve. And with that, I want to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting tonight's event. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Kathleen Farrell for, I believe, some further instruction. So again, thank you all for attending.
I'm going to stand up. Can everybody hear me in the back? All right. Thank you, Dr. Lake. Good evening. And before we start, I'd like to just mark the event tonight because we have the privilege of gathering to talk about our children, to talk about our district, and I'd like to have a moment of silence for the people of Ukraine. They do not have that privilege right now. And I think that's important for us to remember as we engage this evening. So just one moment of silence. Okay. I want to thank the district and particularly Andrea Hosenfeld and Beth Johnson and Dr. Lake for making this happen. And this forum is being live streamed on the district's YouTube channel. So you can look at that and it'll stay up so you can look at it later and send it to your friends and family. My name is Kathleen Farrell of the St. Louis League, and I'm going to be your moderator this evening. And I want to thank the candidates for participating. You're going to have the privilege of electing two candidates for 2 3-year terms to serve on the Board of Education here. They are up here in the order as they appear on the ballot. Mr. David Randleman, Ms. Jennifer Miller, Ms. Carrie Clay, and Ms. Julia Voss. The League believes that one of the best ways for voters to learn about people seeking election is to hear candidates speak in an unrehearsed kind of manner and to answer your questions, not my questions, your questions in a public forum. Now, they're going to give their opening statements in that order as they appear on the ballot. And then for the closing statements, we're going to start with Ms. Voss and go this way. And then what we're going to do, so those are going to be 2-minute statements. And we have a fine timekeeper over there, Ms. Margaret Gray, who takes no nonsense. And she's going to give them fair warning. And then what we're going to do is give each candidate an opportunity in 1 minute to answer each question. And what I'm going to do is keep rotating down so that the next, everybody takes turns being first and last and in between. If there is a question that is addressed to a particular candidate, what I've done is I've tweaked that question a little bit so that all the candidates can answer. Because every candidate has a right to answer every question. Now, here's your job, and I think you've already done a fine job of it, and I know you'll continue to do it. This is the pile of questions that I received from the district, over 120 of them, okay? In addition to that, you have the opportunity to come up with new questions tonight. And again, the questions that are posed to these candidates are not the League's questions or the district's questions, they're your questions. And so what we're going to do is to try to answer as many as we can. You're going to think about some things, and so when you're done, if you need another card, raise your hand, Our volunteers, if you could raise your hands back there, they're looking all around, and as soon as you need another card, or if you have a card that's ready to pick up, they're going to come get it. Now, they've got a list of questions that I've tried to pull from here so that we're not going to have any repeat questions, okay? But lots of times when you listen to people speak, you think of something else. And so I want to get as much of that in here as possible. You can audio tape this or videotape it as you want. And I, in the League in good faith, am trying to represent as many as I think the pressing issues that you all are concerned with are. Okay? Anybody have any questions about that? All right. With that in mind, then, we are going to begin with opening statements. And Mr. Randleman, I think you're first.
Thank you. So, yes, my name is David Randleman. I immigrated here with my family about 10 years ago, originally from Israel. I was born in Jerusalem. We have 4 children in the district, 2 in high school and 2 in Concord Elementary. I work as a computer architect, a cloud computing architect, and I've been a director of IT in my past and system engineering along with financial operations. When we moved here, we handpicked Lindbergh Schools because of its reputation of being a top school district and because of the teachers and the great ELL program. I'm very thankful for being here. My children have flourished here, and from no English at all, they are now top students in the district. As far as involvement in the community, I participate in the DEI committee. I try to bring in an immigrant perspective. I support other programs like the Forte PTG. I have a business and financial background. I especially specialize in optimization in large organizations, and I have a real estate business. We are fully invested here in Lindbergh Schools, and I really couldn't see my children going anywhere else. As far as reasons for running, as mentioned, I really appreciate what Lindbergh Schools has done for us, and I want to give something back to the community. I also have some concerns over the academics recently, with about 50% of our 3rd and 4th graders being below proficiency levels in math, and about 35% in ELA. And I know we don't teach to the test anymore, but I still have concerns about not meeting the Missouri State Standard proficiency. Beyond that, I want to help.
Your time is up, Mr. Randleman.
Okay, sorry.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, if we could hold applause, I forgot to say that till we get to the end, and then we'll have a rousing one. How about that? Okay, Ms.
right.
Miller.
Well, thank you to the League for running and the district for hosting and for everyone here tonight and watching at home. I'm Jennifer Miller. I am currently on the board and I'm running for re-election. My husband and I bought our first home together in Lindbergh 17 years ago, and we have 2 children in the district, a 5th grader at Concord and a 7th grader at Sperring. I'm a former special education teacher, and I currently work with very young children with disabilities and developmental delays, and so I know how important it is for children to get access to the programs they need to succeed. I'm running again because I want to make sure we continue our work that the board has prioritized based on feedback we have received from the community these past 4 years. I believe in looking at the whole picture, and I will work towards structured literacy, rigorous, challenging instruction for all students, continued safety and security, oversight, transparency, and open two-way communication with the community. I want to make sure that we continue to be fiscally responsible, we continue to have good relationship with our teachers and staff, and that we prioritize instruction and programs that benefit all students. And we need to place value on the things that matter most, our students and the learning that takes place in our classrooms every day. Originally, when I ran for the board, I wanted to work towards our growing student enrollment, developing a strategic plan, and repairing relationships with staff, while including the community and setting priorities for the district. We have done many of those things. Our high school is addressing our incoming high school enrollment, and we will have a new permanent home for the Gifted Center to alleviate space at our middle schools and elementary school. We have developed the strategic plan, and we have a master facility plan now, which was created based on feedback from the community. We have implemented a tuition-free full-day kindergarten and facilitated healthy relationships with our staff. And we are a destination district for both students, families, and teachers. So when I say I will work on something, I mean it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Clay.
I'm Carrie Clay, and I am so excited to be here in person for this event tonight. I would like to thank the League of Women Voters in the district for making this forum possible. I'm a 37-year resident of the district. I'm a proud Lindbergh Flyer myself. I attended Long Elementary School, Sperry Middle School, and graduated from Lindbergh High School. In my professional life, I was a CPA and worked in public accounting in the audit practice at PwC. I currently love being a stay-at-home mom to my 16-year-old and 10-year-old boys. My husband and I decided to move to Lindbergh for one reason, and that was for the schools. I wanted my kids to be Lindbergh Flyers just like me. I was very involved as a parent in the schools. I was on a PTG board, led PTG projects, was a scout leader, a parent volunteer, a sports coach, team manager for sports. And about 3 years ago, my involvement in the district began to look a little bit different when my youngest son was diagnosed with dyslexia. We were not able to get the support that he needed at Lindbergh Schools, so my husband and I made the difficult decision to move him to a school that was equipped to handle his needs. After that, we looked at my older son's education and realized that he was experiencing gaps too, and we also made another difficult decision to move him outside the district as well. Those are the key factors driving my reason for running. I am concerned about the direction that the district that I love so much is headed, and my primary goal, if elected to the board, will be to return academic excellence.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Voss.
Hello, thanks to everybody for coming out tonight. My name is Julia Voss. I moved to the district 8 years ago from South City with my husband. We have 3 children in the district. I have 2 at Sappington and 1 at Truman. And we moved here because my husband is a Lindbergh grad and he wanted his children to have the great education that he had. So we moved here and we started at Long and then moved over into these other schools when the redistricting happened. I'm running because I think that the school sets the tone for the community, and I want our community to be one that values support for all levels of learning, support for teachers, and a respectful dialogue among its members. And I think there's a lot of ways that Lindbergh's doing really well in all 3 of these values. And we're going to talk about some areas tonight with all the questions, I'm sure, where there's room for improvement, because there's always room for improvement. I think that my background makes me especially well suited to help move those improvements forward. I'm an attorney. I have been with Greensfelder, Hemker & Gale for about 20 years now. I started as an antitrust litigator, which is just as boring as it sounds. And the firm, after about, I think 7 or maybe 10 years, asked me to take a leadership role overseeing a department that oversees the electronic evidence, the handling of electronic evidence in lawsuits. So I run a department that has lawyers and technical people in it. And in that role, I am responsible for budgeting, HR issues, strategic plans, attorney education, and I still practice as an attorney every once in a while in between all those other things. I'm trained to consider all sides of every issue every time and listen to what people are saying, and I think that will help me make good decisions if I'm elected to the board on April 5th.
Okay, thank you very much. And so we're going to start with the questions now, and we're going to start with you, Ms. Miller, on the first question. And there were a number of people who talked about educational excellence and their concerns about that. So let's start with this question. How should educational excellence, achievement, and gaps be defined? Is it MAP scores? A couple of people tonight have talked about their concerns about STEM education and gaps there, but how do you measure these things?
All right, thank you. We've had a lot of discussions recently about MAP in our district and a lot of changes that we have made so that we are making sure we're teaching priority standards that are aligned with Missouri learning standards and developing proficiency scales so we can measure that progress that each student is making. We are also using a nationally normed test called NWEA to ensure that each student is making growth not only once a year, that test is given 3 times a year to give that. And we also use FastBridge to ensure that our younger elementary students are moving out of that at-risk category and into proficiency and higher. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Clay?
We, in order to evaluate our academic excellence, we need to look at a lot of things. One of those things being the MAP testing. MAP testing is the only test that is standardized across the state, so it is really our only true measure of how we are comparing to other schools in the state of Missouri. We also need to use the internal tests that Jen mentioned, NWEA, FastBridge, and other assessments that our teachers give. We need to look at our ACT, SAT scores, and another concept that I would like to pursue if elected to the board is taking a look at students like 5 years out after graduation and seeing where they're at. I think that would be a really interesting indicator to see, how our students are really performing in the real world.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Voss?
I think all the tests that they have talked about obviously are ways to measure people, or measure how the students are succeeding. I think that there are other ways to look at it too, though. Just the offerings of the district. How many advanced courses are offered? How many courses are offered for students who don't want to go to college? Because we need to make sure that every student can succeed with whatever path they want. And if they don't want to go to college, we have to prepare them for what's next after that. So I think we need to make sure we're looking at everybody who's on every end of the spectrum. I also think we should look at things like extracurriculars. One of the strongest things this district has going for it is its music programs. They're amazing. They are truly amazing. The strings program is great, and I've heard the band is great too, but I'm not in that, so I can't speak to it personally. These are things that teach children cooperation and dedication and not giving up when something is hard, because the violin is hard. So I think that we need to also look at all the offerings the district has.
Thank you. Mr. Randleman?
Thank you. I think the MAP tests are the only test that gives an objective view on where we are. We're supposed to teach the children according to the Missouri State Standard. I realize it's not ideal, and I realize that we, as a district, don't want to test the children, prepare the children for the test, but I still expect, as mentioned, a proficiency level. And I also think the other tests that were mentioned, the FastBridge, and the NWEA, are good teacher benchmarks to see where we're at from the goal we placed on the year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Ms. Clay, we're going to start with you this time with the question. And we're staying on the same topic because people had a lot of questions about the standings of Lindbergh. And here's one that appeared about 5 or 6 times that I saw. Here's the statement, and I cannot attest to the truthfulness of the statement, so I'm going to read you what I read. Lindbergh has fallen in the rankings from number 1 in 2015 to number 76 today. I saw different numbers. These are the numbers I saw the most, okay? Question is, why? And we're going to start with you, Ms. Clay.
I think a big reason for our academic decline is our literacy program. Our literacy rates in our district are not good. Depending on the grade level that you look at, we're somewhere between 35 to 40% of our students struggling to read. And obviously, if you're struggling to read, that is really going to affect how you perform in all of your other classes. I also believe we need to bring a focus back to our foundational academic skills like grammar, handwriting, spelling, vocabulary. Also, we need to bring math intervention back into our schools. That was removed, and we no longer have additional support for our elementary students that are struggling in math. I believe we need to make sure we have classes in place to challenge our students that need an extra challenge. And
Thank you. Ms. Voss.
I think we need to start with whether that 76 is really a true number, and I do not believe that it is, and Desi does not believe that it is. Desi said when they released those scores that it would be a gross misuse of the data to compare this to prior years. And it had a whole list of factors that, many schools may have faced. What Lindbergh faced was 20% of the kids didn't take the test. When 20% of your student body isn't included in the number, it's invalid. So that number is not a true ranking. It's not where Lindbergh stands. But I do think that there are a lot of improvements to be made to improve academics, and I agree with the literacy program being one of them. I have 3 children. 2 of them needed reading intervention. That shouldn't happen. So we need to fix the elementary literacy program to be more structured, to have more phonics, to be more cohesive. And if we can do that, since a lot of things stem from your ability to read, then everything should, from there, move forward.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Randleman.
Thank you. And sorry, I was kind of focused on something else. Do you mind repeating the question again?
It is, Lindbergh has fallen in the rankings from number 1 in 2015 to number 76. How come?
Okay, so I will say that I don't believe it's just the school's fault. There's no question that the pandemic played into this as well, and there are a lot of factors. I believe it's a combination of, but if we look at 2019, for example, we were, I believe, 34th place, so we were already dropping even before the pandemic. It has to do with removing the framework of support for the children, the math interventions, and more recently, the challenge classes. And, I think the literacy programs and math programs need to be improved, so.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Miller, you have the last word on this one.
So when we look at our MAP scores, we also need to look at what has changed over the past few years. We no longer teach to the test, as David mentioned earlier, and I think Carrie did too. We no longer receive pre-released test questions prior to administering the test. We are undoing a lot of things that truly were not good for students. Interventions were given to students who were, within 5 points of moving into the proficient category, instead of students who were further away from that category and needed the intervention more. The district is trying very hard to make sure that all students are meeting our priority standards and moving through the grades as they move through as they move through the grades, that they are moving higher along into proficiency. So we have recently added some phonics and phonemic awareness in our elementary schools, and yes, we need to move towards more of that structured literacy, which we are working towards and hope to implement in a year. And again, math interventions, we need to make sure we are doing that as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Voss, you're first this time. Staying on the same topic. I had 4 questions in that big pile that said, if we looked at other districts who were highly ranked and what happened during the COVID period, they didn't fall down nearly as much as Lindbergh did. Why do you think that's so, if you think it's true, and what are we doing now to address that gap?
I think that it's true for some districts and not for others. If you look at the data, some other districts did fall and others didn't. But one thing that I mentioned earlier, that 20% that didn't take the test, there was a lot of mixed messaging from Desi about whether we were going to have to take the test. And so the message out to the families was that we don't think you're going to have to come to take this test. Then right at the last minute, oh wait, yes you are, no you aren't, yes you are, and Lindbergh didn't go out and really push it for people to come in. And so there actually was a fear that when schools started again in the fall, that the district would have to retake the test because there weren't high enough I think it's 80 or 85% has to take it for Desi to be happy, but it turned out that Desi met the goal overall for the state, so Lindbergh didn't have to. And so the districts that were better at, not better, but more diligent about getting their kids in to make them take the test, they did better. And we could have been more diligent about it, but at the same time, it's a pandemic, and people are scared to come in. So I really don't fault the district for doing that.
Okay. Mr. Randleman, you're going to be first this time. We're going to change topics. But I had a number of questions about...
I'll need to answer that question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Ms. Voss was the first.
I'm sorry. Pardon me?
Is it my turn to answer then?
Oh, yes. Yes, it is.
All right, so.
Yes, it is. See, I told you. This is what you get by inviting an old lady. Mr. Randleman.
Thank you. All right. Well, I think in this last year, we've introduced a lot of changes into the school. We've added social emotional learning. We've added a lot of pilots. There's been a lot of changes, and I think that's been a contributing factor to our more dramatic drop in the rankings compared to other school districts.
Okay, thank you very much. And I was so set on you answering this one first. So, you're first this time? Oh, you haven't? Gosh, I really am screwing up. Ms. Miller, I'm ready about the next question, yeah. Ms. Miller. Ms. Miller.
Okay, so last school year, we had 30% of our students in our virtual programming. In addition to that, we also offered a partial in-person, partial virtual programming with many districts around us were not able to do. So I do think that plays a role in our state scores and our MAP scores. We had virtual kids come into our school and take this test. They came to buildings that were not their original school building. It was the first time they had been in a school building in over a year. And they took the test in a shorter amount of time than what we have previously allotted for MAP testing. So I do think that plays a role into the ability of children to perform well on a test. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Clay.
I don't think we can discount last year's MAP scores because 22% of our students did not take the test. Those students most likely were in the range, high performers, students that were struggling. So I think we need to consider them. And as far as the decline goes, I think things are just really starting to catch up with us. We have not been on the right track for a while, and I think it's starting to show in our numbers. So I think we've just been snowballing, and we were on the decline before the pandemic hit, and the pandemic exacerbated it, and now we're at the position we're at.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, Mr. Randleman. A number of people had concerns about special education programs. And I'm going to try to capture those in two questions. The first question is, what specific changes do you think should be made to the special school district here to improve their performance?
Well, I've received some feedback from parents that are in the SSD, and I've heard concerns about Lindbergh Schools taking over the kind of the SSD program. To be honest, it's still an area I'd like to research and get more feedback. So, I don't want to draw conclusions before I've researched it more.
Okay, Ms. Miller?
Yes, so I do think it is important that we develop procedures in conjunction with SSD that can be followed from building to building so that what's happening in one building is happening in another building, and those same programs are being offered even to Lindbergh students that are being offered in Kirkwood or other districts. We need to make sure we have evidence-based practices, that our SSD teachers are being able to go to trainings and professional learning and best practices, and that they are given the time to implement those within our buildings. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Clay?
I believe that the district plays a key role in this program, in the SSD program. And we need our district to be advocates for the students receiving SSD services. We need to make sure our students are receiving the best possible SSD services. For example, students in Lindbergh are not able to get Wilson tutoring, which is a literacy program that's available. But meanwhile, students in next door Kirkwood are able to get that through SSD. So we need to be better advocates for our students in that regard. As Jen mentioned, we need to make sure, we need to have a set program that's followed for SSD for evaluations and things that's the same across all schools. It's easier to get SSD services in some schools than other schools. It shouldn't be that way. I think I'll stop there.
Okay. Ms. Voss.
It's my understanding, and I also think, I haven't had to use these services myself, so I'm going from what I've talked to people on, and it's my understanding from talking to people that it's not Lindbergh teachers who are the problem. They're doing everything they can to help these kids get help, and that it's really the special school district is where people feel that the communication breaks down. And I don't want to blame special school district because I haven't talked specifically with them yet. If I was a board member, I would. But I think that maybe there needs to be a little more accountability on their end, because Lindbergh's the one who's accountable for these kids on all sorts of testing. And I don't know exactly where special school district comes in and gets any kind of accountability for what's happening. And so I think that's what I would like to explore a little bit more.
Okay, we're going to start with you this time, Ms. Miller. And staying on the subject of special education, what is one group of students who require special education that you're most concerned about? Like, is there one group of students that needs an initiative right away, and what would that be? In other words, have you identified, have you thought about one group that you have a lot of students who are experiencing that challenge, and what would you do about it?
So obviously, I think all of our students should be getting the services they need and have access to those programs. But in regards to this specific question, that yes, our reading and writing, students who have reading and writing disabilities diagnosed within our district, really, I am concerned. It's touched my family, and it's hard to make sure that your child is getting the best program and the services they're supposed to be getting. And I have a background in special education, yet it's still sometimes an adversarial conversation or an adversarial IEP meeting, and that's not fair to our students, it's not fair to our families, and it's something I think needs to be worked on. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Clay?
As Jen mentioned, we of course want to make sure all of our students are getting the services and supports that they need. But students with dyslexia are very close to my heart because I have a child with dyslexia. I have advocated in this district for years to get the support. I have come and spoke at board meetings, and the advocacy of parents in this district has fallen on deaf ears. It's really sad that these kids are not able to get the support they need. It's the reason why we had to leave the district, and we need to do better for these students, and we can.
Ms. Voss?
I would agree that if we have children who can't read, they're not going to be able to succeed in school. And so if we can't get special school district services for them, then maybe there are other things Lindbergh can do, like getting more reading specialists to come in and help, at least maybe in the interim, because emerging from the pandemic is going to be so hard. There's going to be learning loss. And so if I were elected to the board, I think that would be one thing I would push for if we can make it work with the budget, is getting more reading specialists at every school so that kids who are on the borderline and maybe can't quite get special school district services, then Lindbergh can provide it for them. And that, I think that would go a long way to helping some of these problems too.
Thank you. Mr. Randleman?
Thank you. Obviously, I'm concerned for all children, and I want to see make sure we're taking care of everyone. But I will say that I've seen for several years now parents come up and talk about dyslexia as a concern, board meeting after board meeting. And I know that in Lindbergh, about over 30% have issues in that field, whereas in the population, it's one out of it's 1/5. So, yeah, that is a concern for me too. I agree with what Carrie said. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Ms. Clay, you're going to be first this time. Going to switch topics here. I had a lot of questions about concerns about what was going on at the elementary level that affected middle school levels. So here's the question I tried to put together. Do you believe that flaws in the elementary curriculum have caused deficits in our middle schoolers? If so, what are they and what should we pursue?
Yes, I do believe that what is going on in our elementary schools is affecting the performance of our middle schoolers. They are not entering middle school prepared. I had a conversation when I was out canvassing with a mom who said her sixth grader just had to write her first paragraph all by herself, and the mom said to the teacher, "That's great that she's doing it, but I don't think she will get the capitalization or punctuation right." So we need to really focus on those basics in elementary school, reading, writing, math, vocabulary, grammar, spelling, all of that. We need to have solid foundation, and we also need to make sure that we have a good connect between the teachers in elementary and the teachers in middle school, so that the teachers in elementary are ensuring that the kids are ready to meet the expectations of middle school when they get there.
Thank you. Ms. Voss.
I'll agree that vertical meeting between the teachers hadn't been happening as much, and that would be an excellent way to make sure that when the kids go into sixth grade, that they have gotten the skills that the teachers want them to have. I think with the middle school right now, there's a really good opportunity with the way they redid it. There's a huge block time now. And they could really use that time for more tutoring, for individualized tutoring, and for maybe some more push and help there, because they have this huge amount of time for flex time now on the longer days. And I think better use of that time, I know it's the first year that they've done it, and so maybe it's not quite as structured as it should have been, it could be. And I think that there's a real opportunity for helping the students using that time.
Thank you. Mr. Randleman.
Yeah, it's interesting that us parents who have been here in the district for a while and have students that went through elementary, let's say 10 years ago, can tell the difference. Our children, for example, really did well, and now the first ones and now the more recent ones are having problems with grammar, reading, and writing. I also feel that the math intervention, which was really important, and yeah, I guess that's really about it.
Okay, Ms. Miller.
So I think this question's kind of getting towards asking about our reading and our writing instructional resources at the elementary level. And our district has said, like, we need to do a better job here. And that is why we implemented Haggerty at the elementary level, and we moved towards more phonics instruction, and we absolutely need to finish our literacy pilots. We need to make sure we're using Fidelity to find those, to find which one will work the best, and we need to move to a program that is better aligned and focuses on phonics, phonemic awareness, vocabulary building, and grammar. And I do believe, too, we need to make sure that our 5th and 6th grade teachers are able to meet and do that vertical teaming so that our incoming 5th graders are prepared, and that our 5th grade teachers know what our 6th grade teachers are looking for when our 5th graders walk into that building. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Ms. Voss, we're going to start with you, and we are entering into the territory of understanding and talking about two things. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, and something called critical race theory. So, I put together a number of questions that address those topics. Let's start with the first one, and Ms. Voss, you're going to be first. Do you believe that the concepts of diversity, equity, and inclusion should be incorporated into the curriculum across the board? Why or why not?
I think they should. It's really important to make sure that every student feels that they belong here. But I think that what you have to do first is level set on what you mean by diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I'm probably going to head to the next question, but critical race theory too. Those phrases have taken on a meaning that I don't think that they actually initially started as. Critical race theory started as a graduate level political viewpoint, and it has seeped its way down into our vernacular, and I don't think it means the same thing. To me, when I say, yes, I believe this, I just mean every student should walk into the room and feel like they belong there, and that the teacher and their friends are going to feel that they have value and that their story has value. And it could be, it doesn't have to be a minority. It could be, one kid who's had a different life experience.
Thank you. And let me just clarify, we're going to do diversity, equity, and inclusion first, and then we're going to move into critical race theory. So everybody's going to have time to talk about all of this. Fair enough? So, Mr. Randleman.
Yeah, so I joined the DEI committee because I had concerns about what was happening. As an immigrant here, and someone who was accepted in the district, I was very concerned when I saw the district sending teachers to the EEC, the Educational Equity Consultants, where racism was redefined and pitted as oppressors versus oppressed. And here's the bottom line, the way I feel. It's very important that we accept everyone, but you also have to have a framework that brings us together. And that is the American framework, right? That is where we live, we all have the same rights. And if we don't have that, it's going to be very hard for us to have that diversity within it. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Miller.
So a couple of things. The state of Missouri does require the district to have an equity plan. So that's one reason why we have it. But yes, I want every student to come to school, feel like they belong, and feel like they are included. We want them to come to school and learn in a place where they know they are valued, where they feel heard. And I also would like to address some of the training our teachers have done. After we had 2 cohorts go through that training, the district kind of reevaluated and said, this is not the direction we want our district going in regards to this, and we need to look at other resources. And so we made that shift. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Clay.
I absolutely think that we must make sure all students feel like they belong at Lindbergh Schools, no matter where they come from or what their background or situation is. I am very concerned about our current DEI program. When I look at our MAP testing results, I noticed that for math, only 11% of our Black students are proficient, and only 35% of them are proficient in ELA, and I find that very concerning. I think we need to make sure that our efforts are data-driven and that we are really, with our programs in that area, we are really achieving the results that we're trying to achieve, which is to make everyone feel like they belong, and to make sure that everyone is successful in academics.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to start with you this time, Mr. Randleman. And there was a pattern in the questions that I saw, and the pattern was this. A number of people were saying that they believed that the inclusion of diversity, equity, and inclusion subjects in the curriculum took away from what we consider to be traditional academic subjects. And so I wanted to sort of get at this cause and effect because it was in so many of your questions. And so here's the question I came up with. Do discussions of diversity, equity, and inclusion conducted by educational professionals, having been discussed with the district about what the children need, harm children? And I guess when I say harm children, I'm looking at 2 things that were in your questions. One of them was taking away from the traditional academic subjects. The other one was, a number of you talked about not wanting children to think as if they were, you used the language oppressors, divisive, et cetera, et cetera. So my question is, if they're conducted by educational professionals in a way that the district has discussed, do they harm children? If you believe they do, cite evidence of that. And it could be emotional harm, it could be traditional academic kinds of things, et cetera. Is that fair summary? You get to start with that one, Mr. Randleman.
Thank you. Well, this one's close to my heart because, again, as immigrants, we noticed, and our children reported to us that they were being taught through a narrative, history through a narrative. So, for example, they learned that the Constitution was mainly there to perpetuate white people and oppress minorities. And that's not the case. That's not how it was. But what it started doing is it was starting to reflect on the children. They started looking at themselves and saying, well, wait a minute, how does that affect me? And they had to choose, well, I'm an immigrant, but do I fall in that category of an oppressor? And the children had a lot of discussions on this, and I think that's the problem. I want to bring objective history. I want to bring it factually. I want the children's freedom of conscience to be what determines how they view that history and not through narrative.
Okay. Ms. Miller, and again, part of the question was about, cite evidence of that. So, Ms. Miller?
So I don't think that we should ever take away from our academics and that standard that we want our students to reach. If we're teaching, equity, diversity, and inclusion, those things should be embedded throughout our day. They should kind of be natural parts of the discussion. And obviously within the classroom, you're going to have students, write a paper or do a project that kind of brings up issues that maybe aren't in the curriculum, aren't in the teacher's lesson plan, but are going to have to be addressed, and we have to give room to our professionals to do the job that they're trained to do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Clay?
I really hope our current board has examined all of the data surrounding the DEI programs that they're using. All of our decisions really need to be data-driven. We need to make sure that they're really accomplishing what we're setting out to accomplish. I think, as I said before, making sure all students are included and feel welcome at school is extremely important. I think modeling behaviors is a great way to do that. I think we also need to work directly with families who have a child that may be struggling in that area to identify issues and work towards solutions that make those children who are not feeling included feel more included.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Voss?
I'll answer it in parts. First, I don't think it's taking away from academics for two reasons. One, because most of the character lessons that they have are done during a class meeting time or in a very short amount of time that's not really designated already for strict academic speaking anyway. Part of being a teacher is bonding with your students and having these meetings. So they're embedded into that. For another reason, if you look at the books that the kids read, I'm going to use 6th grade as an example, they end up with a wide variety of books that they get to choose from, and then they have book club, and there are all sorts of different protagonists. And so the classroom discussion is from a whole bunch of different protagonists' point of view, and that is one way to just bring it in and have critical thinking and analytical thinking about these different experiences. And that's inclusion and equity and diversity. It's critical thinking about that. About not wanting them to think it's divisive, I think we should teach our children history, and it's not always pretty.
Okay, thank you very much.
Ran out of time.
Ms. Miller, you're going to be first this time. And there were a lot of questions about quote-unquote critical race theory. And my question, putting all of them together, is do you believe that it is included in the curriculum at Lindbergh? If so, where and to what effect? So we'll start with you, Ms. Miller.
I do not believe that critical race theory is in our curriculum. Our curriculum aligns with the Missouri Learning Standards. It's pretty short, but I don't think it is. Thanks.
Okay, got it. Ms. Clay?
I know the district's stance is that critical race theory is not taught taught in our schools. But as the board does not approve very detailed curriculums that have to be followed by our teachers, and the teachers are given a lot of leeway in the classrooms, I can't say with certainty if it is or is not included. Unfortunately, I can't be in every classroom every day, so I'm not sure if it's in there.
Ms. Voss?
It's not in there because we don't have graduate student legal scholars in our classrooms. We have kids who are learning history. And critical race theory is a very defined term or concept at that high level. When you're talking about history, sometimes it's not pretty. And you have to have some hard discussions with the kids. They need to understand what happened, and they can evaluate what the effect on what happened is today. That doesn't mean that teachers are trying to make white children feel bad, because they're not. They are trying to teach history and let our children learn what happened and learn from it and learn to be better for it. So I don't think it's taught in the schools because it's just not what people think it is when they hear the term.
Okay. Mr. Randleman?
Thank you. Well, critical race theory isn't a curriculum, and it isn't something that is a subject matter. It's a lens. It's a way to interpret things. And, if I tell a story and I tell it through a very specific perspective, that story is going to take on a completely different meaning. And that's what's happening in our school district. And the contempt for our country is, in my opinion, coming from this perspective. If you look at the children who don't want to stand for the flag anymore, and I respect that that's their right, but we should be proud of our nation. We should hear the history and every single fact, but it needs to be objective and allow the narrative to be narrative free so that the students can decide. That's the critical thinking that we should all have. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to start with Ms. Clay this time. A related question. Exactly what would be your role on the school board engaging in a quote-unquote inappropriate material or book complaint?
I know our district is currently working on revising its library policies, and unfortunately, we don't quite know what those are. But, right now, and as I believe probably will be the case going forward, the board will be there to, if books are appealed, they will be there to vote and decide whether or not they will remain in the library with or without restrictions.
Okay. Ms. Voss?
The role of the board member is to follow the policies. And if the policies are, there's a committee to hear it, and if the committee, I think the committee gives back a recommendation, the parent can either take it or not, and if they appeal it, that's when the board gets involved. And so at that point, I read the book and see if I thought it violated any policies, and if it doesn't violate any policies, it stays in.
Okay. Mr. Randleman?
Thank you. Well, I would hope to see books that are, first of all, have educational value. But even if they're books that have concerns, I think this is easy to solve. We need to properly catalog these books, and we need to allow for parents to categorically opt out from having their children access it either through the library or at checkout. In order to do that, we have to have a proper placing of these books, and right now they're randomly placed in different areas, and there's no parental boundaries placed at all. So as a board member, if elected, I would hope to have those boundaries in place, and that way parents that do want their children to have access to certain books can do so, and those parents who have concerns can have the confidence that their children will be protected from it.
Ms. Miller?
Yes, so as a board member, we need to ensure that our policies are being followed. And as Carrie mentioned, those policies have been discussed for months in our teaching and learning board advisory with community members. And we had a first reading of those policies at our February board meeting last month. Our parents have the right to challenge books, and a committee should be formed to review those concerns and challenges. And if appealed, then the board would vote on to remove or not remove or keep the book with restriction. Our parents have the ability to have their children, to limit access and opt out for their children, and I believe that's important, but I think it's also important to ensure that other children do have access to the book if their parents want that. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to start with you this time, Ms. Voss. Or, excuse me, Ms. Clay. You answered, you were first last time, Ms. Voss. Okay. A related question, and lots of you gave me some homework to do last week. I needed to learn about a living curriculum, because so many of you talked about it. And it seemed to be talked about in two different ways. One of them was a constantly changing kind of curriculum. That was one way it was used. The other way was to have a set of sort of required texts. In English classes were the ones where people's examples came through the most. And then there were other texts that were included that people were concerned about, that they included certain kinds of topics that they found to be problematic and in some ways offensive, like rape, like child abuse, like violence. So the question is, what do you think a living curriculum is? Because we want folks to know that you know. And secondly, what action do you think it should be taken if you think some action should be taken about it? So,
I think a living curriculum is one that has guidelines that are set to the Missouri standards, but that gives the teachers room to choose a different particular material if that need arises in their class, in their professional judgment. And I think we need to give our teachers the room to make that professional judgment. I think parents have the ability to talk to their children and see what they're learning, or call the teacher and say, what's on my kid's plate today, or this week. And if there is something that the parent doesn't like, they can talk to the teacher about it, and I'm sure that the teachers will work with them to come up with another option. But the teachers need to be given the room to do the job that we've hired them to do.
Mr. Randleman.
Thank you. The problem with the living curriculum is that it opens the door, not always good or bad, but it opens the door to move away from the board-approved curriculum. And even if it meets Missouri state standards, I see it as a lack of transparency with the parents. The parents send their children based on what the curriculum is, what they know to be the curriculum. It's published on Lindbergh's website. And in practice, they can't always track and know what's being taught. And that catches parents off guard. And I would say that, in my opinion, the living curriculum needs to go away. Thank you.
Ms. Miller.
So when the district refers to living curriculum, they're talking about high school classes that are added in between curriculum cycles. And this is done when, there's student interest in certain paths and certain classes, like we have a drone class now. And so the board does approve those when they approve the high school course catalog, and syllabus are developed to be given to families and the student. In the future, we can absolutely make amendments to our curriculum where we're not voting on an entire English curriculum per se, but this new class is being added so we can vote on this. But let's be clear, curriculum is different than instructional resources. When we're talking about books in a classroom or worksheets or assignments and lesson plans, those are instructional resources, and those by board policy are chosen by instructional professionals, whether it be a teacher or a library media specialist or whatnot. So I think it's important to know that when a novel is different than one year to the next, it's because it's an instructional resource and not curriculum. Thank you.
Ms. Clay.
I think the issue here is, let's make sure that all the curriculums are approved by the school board, and the board really needs to dig into them and see what's in there. That's a board member's duty, in my opinion, and I don't think we've been doing, our current board has been doing that enough. Once the board establishes the curriculum and, the books, like Jen said, have been set, the teachers can teach the curriculum through whatever vehicle they want to teach it through, but they need to follow the curriculum. We also need to make sure the curriculum is very transparent. Parents should know exactly what it is. We cannot rely on asking our kids what they're learning in school. I have an elementary school kid. He usually doesn't know. He comes home and says he has no idea. You guys know how it is. They don't know. And then I have a teenager, and they don't want to talk to you about it. So we cannot rely on our kids to tell us what's going on.
Okay. Mr. Randleman, you get to be first this time. The difference between curriculum and teaching approaches, particular materials in class, lesson plans, et cetera, is something that was asked a lot about. In some ways, I got the sense sometimes folks don't quite understand the difference. But to represent your questions, what role should the school board have in overseeing particular lesson plans, book or article choices with teachers? Should the school board be telling teachers how to carry out their lesson plans?
Thank you. Well, I think if it's a well-structured curriculum, there will be a good foundation of a lesson plan to build off of. Obviously, there's a flexibility and some freedom for the teachers to bring in additional examples or things that'll help contribute to that lesson plan within the class. So, if it's in biology, bringing in samples or additional material to show things, I think that's, teachers obviously need that flexibility. But again, a well-structured curriculum will give also a good lesson plan that the teacher can build a foundation from. Thank you.
Ms. Miller.
So no, I do not think the board should be telling teachers how to teach. As I already mentioned, teachers are trained experts in education, and they should be developing their lesson plans and choosing their resources. They're professionals, they need to be able to do their job, and board members are not all educational experts. Our board needs to be able to communicate what our community values and provide that oversight that Missouri learning standards are being met within our curriculums and that teachers are using their lessons and resources to meet those standards and curriculums. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Clay.
I think this really depends on the curriculum that is being used. For example, the literacy curriculum that hopefully our district implements is going to be very structured, and it's going to be very important that it's taught with fidelity. And it may not allow for as much flexibility as teachers have been used to in the past. And, if that's what's best for our students, then that's what we need to do. I think teachers having autonomy is very important. I don't think we should tell them what their lesson plans need to be or review them or anything like that. But in some cases it is going to be very structured, and we need to make sure, if that's the way the program is laid out, that it's followed.
Thank you. Ms. Voss.
I think the board should set the goals and the values for what the materials will be, but at the end of the day, you have a teacher, and then you have the department heads, and then you have a principal, and then you have everybody in central office who are all educational professionals. And any issue in a particular lesson should work its way up through that chain so that the people who are trained in education can figure out what the best course forward is. If it makes it to the board, then yes, we get involved and figure it out. But I think that there's a structure in place for lesson plans to be handled that doesn't involve the board in most cases.
Okay, thank you. We're going to start with you this time, Ms. Miller. And while we're talking about teachers, there were 8 questions that began with the premise that teacher morale is low. If that's true, what is the one step you would take, one initiative you would take to improve that morale from the perspective of a board member? What would you do?
To my knowledge, our teaching staff does not have low morale. We have worked on this diligently for the past 4 years. Our negotiation cycles with our teachers are incredibly short in comparison to what they used to be prior to 2018. 1 year it was one meeting and they were finished, and then they had a 99% ratification of the agreement. This year they just had a ratification agreement at 98%, and I believe it was a 3-year salary and language agreement that is fabulous for our district and just shows that our teachers and our administration and our board are working well together. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Clay?
I'm going to agree with Jen in saying that our teacher retention rates in our district are very high. I mean, we only had about a 5% turnover last year, and hopefully that is an indicator that teacher morale is high. But I can tell you one thing that I would do to improve it, if it is in fact low, is to take some of the things that teachers are responsible for off their plate. They have to wear so many different hats. They have to be teacher, they have to be psychologist, they have to be behavioral expert, they have to deal with parents. Way too many things. We need to remove some of that from the teachers so they can focus on teaching.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Voss?
If I thought teacher morale was low, I would call somebody and ask them, is teacher morale low? Let's talk to the teachers. Let's hear what they have to say. Because in Lindbergh, the teacher morale isn't low, to my knowledge. It is in other parts of the country. It's as low as it's ever been in other parts of the country. But in Lindbergh, they're happy. And I think it's because the board listens, the administration listens, and you need to be listening to understand if there's a problem to begin with. And I don't think there is.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Randleman?
Thank you. I agree with my fellow candidates here and board member. I will take the opportunity, though, to say thank you to our teachers, and that I really appreciate all the hard work that you do and getting us through this COVID cycle and going back to in-person, learning so quick and dealing with that. So I just want to show that appreciation. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to start with you this time, Ms. Clay. Do you believe that issues of quote-unquote, this is the language of your questions, gender fluidity should be introduced to students in school? If so, at what level?
I think Lindbergh has done a very good job of trying to make all students feel included. We obviously can still continue to work on that. So no matter what a student's gender is or identity is, we need to work and make sure that those students feel included. And there may be times when those conversations do come up in a classroom, and I think we just need to be open and address those issues. But should that be included in our curriculum? I don't think so.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Voss?
The CDC has reported that of LGBTQ students, 23% of them have tried to commit suicide in the past year. And that's an astounding statistic. And I think we should all pay attention to that because it's heartbreaking. And for these students to feel that that is the only option they have, I think we can do them some good by saying we see you and we know you're here and we welcome you. And we can do that a lot of ways. We can do that by having books available. We can have that, books in the library that represent those views. We can have teachers who fall into these categories so that they see that you can be a productive member of society. Look, it doesn't have to end this way. And I do believe that it belongs in a health classroom to a certain extent, because that is where it would come up. And if it comes up, it will come up in classroom discussions with books and things too. And I think it's appropriate to discuss it respectfully.
Thank you. Mr. Randleman?
Thank you. There are many reasons why children go through these different identity questions. And I don't think the school has the capability of always knowing what's going through a child's mind. I would hope that the identity issue is something between the child and their parents. As far as having an acceptable place for all, of course, I want that. That's what the school is all about. But I don't think the school should delve into a child's identity. That is sacred. I think professional psychologists and the parents should be the ones that deal with this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Miller?
So I would like to echo what some of our candidates have said about we need to make sure we include all of our students and whatnot. We need to make sure that our students see themselves reflected in the books that are available to be read, as well as other students being able to read about things, viewpoints they are unaware of. They need to see others' experiences as well. And so when it comes up, I do think it needs to be addressed. This is everyday live experience for some of our students, and we need to honor each of our students. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Tough questions, huh? Everybody ready to take a deep breath? A little bit different kind of question. 3 people said different start times for different schools is a real pain in the neck, okay? Trying to get my elementary school students there by 9, then I try to go to the high school at a different time, and I almost get run over. Could we work this out in some different kind of way? What are your thoughts on that? So we're going to start with you this time, Ms. Voss.
There is a committee that is looking at that, and I know they just changed the times. And the one thing that I personally don't like, I don't like how the middle school has to go to the high school to pick them up, because then the kids end up riding the bus for 45 minutes to get a 10-minute ride home. So I think there's definitely more room to improve on this and see what other options there are out there. The committee will look at all of this and hopefully make some good recommendations after talking to some other districts and experts who've looked at this issue.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Randleman.
Yeah, I'm kind of on a similar opinion. It really comes down to the data. Do different hours have an effect on how well someone is focused on the teaching that day? I'd rather just look at the data. But as a parent who has kids both in high school and elementary, we manage. It's okay.
Okay, Ms. Miller.
I agree, man, it does kind of suck in the morning when you're trying to get kids to different schools at different levels. I think the biggest thing here is, we've been very careful about the amount of money we spend on our busing. The state does not reimburse 100% of busing. It's a very minimal number of what they reimburse in comparison to what they're supposed to reimburse. But we need to make sure that, transportation and the money spent on transportation isn't making us make instructional choices. We need to make sure our instructional choices drive what our buses and transportation are doing. So that might mean we need to prioritize spending a little bit more money on transportation so that we can have 3 routes instead of only 2 routes, and that kids don't have to sit on the bus for half an hour in a different school's parking lot. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Clay?
I agree with a lot of what Ms. Miller said. The transportation situation is very much driven by the cost of transportation. So that's going to play a big factor. Unfortunately, it has to when we look into, new schedules or offering. It would be amazing if all the schools could start at the same time. That would be amazing. But, it really would be a budget question to see if that would be in the budget. And then also to echo what David said, I think, there have been studies that show that teenagers perform better a little bit later in the day. And I know the new high school start time was meant to kind of align with that. But unfortunately, those high schoolers are still getting on the bus at the same time as they were before. So I don't really know that really solved the problem.
Okay, we're going to start with you this time, Ms. Voss. And here's the question. Do you support teachers or other school staff carrying arms on district property? Why or why not?
I think that the resource officer should have arms. That's his job. He's trained to use them. I do not think teachers should. That is a disaster waiting to happen.
Mr. Randleman.
I'm on similar opinion. If it's a trained professional who's gone through a proper course and that's something to be considered, not just any teacher carrying arms.
Okay, Ms. Miller?
I would agree with what both candidates so far have said. Trained professionals, our school resource officer, yes, I am okay with that. I am not comfortable with, arming all of our teachers. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Clay?
I agree with what the other candidates have said. It should be our trained professionals and our school resource officers, and I'd also just like to give a thank you to all of those people for keeping our schools safe.
Okay, so we're going to start with you this time, Mr. Randleman. A number of you online wrote questions about what you thought was a disproportionate amount of money spent on athletics. Sometimes you wrote about field improvements and facility improvements. Sometimes you talked about just how much emphasis there's placed, the value of it placed. And 3 of you wrote specifically about football and saying, it's way too much emphasis and it's dangerous. That was the underlying premise of that question. What do you think about all of this in terms of, do we spend too much money and too much attention on athletics? Should we pay a little bit more attention to the safety of football? Why or why not?
Well, I kind of wish we had more athletics. I think what brings a lot of us together in the school are sports. I mean, it's kind of what brings us. So I'd like to see more of that. I'm not aware exactly of how much budget is put into it, to be honest, but no, I'm in favor of more of those activities.
Ms. Miller?
I agree that athletics is kind of that core, especially at a high school level, that, core school spirit. And I think in a one high school district, we really see that kind of trickle down through all levels of the building. So, I am in favor of our athletics. I don't think we spend too much money on our athletics. I know that with the high school renovations, more money has been spent on, fields, and we did add a gym that actually we weren't even planning to do. The county required us to build a storm shelter, so we turned it into usable space. It was part of the code, so that's all. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Clay?
Those of you that know me know I love athletics. I'm an avid athlete myself, and my kids are very involved in athletics. I believe that some of the root of this question may be related to football, may be the turf field that was included in the Prop R. I feel like a lot of community members didn't know that was in there, and then when they found out that was included in Prop R, they were upset. So I think, there might have been a little bit of a transparency issue. I think we need to be very transparent when it comes to what we're spending our money on. I know the district just recently approved, I think it was about $19 million of certificates of participation. Part of that was for new tennis courts, and I believe there were also some other athletic field improvements in that, and that was outside of Prop R, that was on top. So I think, there may be some concerns with the spending there, and we just need to be transparent.
Hey, Ms. Voss?
I think with football, with the question about it being too dangerous, I think parents can make the decision as to whether they want their children to play the game. So I wouldn't change anything on that in particular. The money on sports needs to be divided, not exactly equally, but at least distributed somewhat fairly. I happen to know that the girls' field hockey team was playing without jerseys for a long time. And it took a parent saying, hey, I'm over here, where are the jerseys? About 20 times before she finally got an answer. So I think it's just taking when something is pointed out like that, some inequality like that, just taking it to the right people and making sure that we do give the money to all groups, not just focus it on one.
Okay. I believe we're going to start with you this time, Ms. Miller. This is a very interesting question, and it popped up twice. So I got to ask it. 2 question writers said Charles Lindbergh, after whom this district is named, history now tells us, was a racist, an anti-Semite, and aligned himself against the United States' effort to join in World War II. I'm reading your language. Should the district reconsider its name because of this legacy? Yes or no? Why or why not? Start with you.
I don't think this is a question that is strictly up to the board. This is a community decision, and I believe input from the community should be sought if this is something our community wants to move forward with or not. Thank you.
Ms. Clay.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Jen on that. We would need to get input from the stakeholders to see if that was really something that the majority of the community was interested in doing before we pursued that avenue.
Ms. Voss.
I have noticed that the district has taken his picture off of a lot of things, and so I think that's probably appropriate. But I agree with everybody else. This is really hard, and there's a lot of issues in this that you'd want to discuss. You can't just say one person would be like, yes, I want to get rid of this. No, I don't. I think we just really need to listen to everybody and have a committee, because, there's got to be a committee for everything. Have a committee formed and talk to the community and really see if this would be something that could be done.
Finally, you, Mr. Randleman.
Thank you. As a Jewish person, I'm saying this, that I think we have to be very careful about taking a person's beliefs or values and applying it as something that cancels their accomplishment. When we look at Lindbergh, we're looking at the accomplishments that were done in flight and everything that he represented, not what his personal beliefs were, and the context of its time. So I would urge to be cautious on that, and we don't want to just erase our history because of that. You'll find fault with everyone in history. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now, I'm going to ask one last question, but before I do, there were a number of questions, the answers to which I think belong in your closing statements. So I'm going to give you a few examples. What makes you best qualified to occupy one of these two seats? What experience do you have that you think the district on the Board of Education really could use? What quality do you have that will make you an effective leader? What drives you? What's your mission that you want to bring to this job that makes you a candidate that I should vote for in the election? Those kinds of questions and your experience, I think, belong answered in that final statement. But here's the last question, and I want to sort of end on an up note. I hope you know I didn't dodge any difficult topics tonight. And that is, what is best? What is the one thing that you think is best about this district? Before we go to our closing statements. And now, let's see. Do I start with Ms. Clay? I think so.
This is a tough question because obviously there's so many things to love about Lindbergh. We have amazing educators. I'm really personally excited about all the new programs at the high school, the dual credit program, the AP capstone program, and the CAPS internship program. I think we need to give our high schoolers as many different opportunities as possible. And I also love the extracurriculars and clubs and sports at our schools. The music program's one of the best in the country, so lots of things to love about Lindbergh.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Voss.
I really appreciate all the opportunities for everybody at the high school. I think that there's just so many different ways a student can go with so many different interests, and I think the high school has done a wonderful job of meeting everybody where they are. I think Lindbergh's strongest asset, though, is the community. I think that we have traditionally been drawn together and rallied around the high school and the whole schools, not just the high school, but high schools where we all end up. We all end up flyers at the high school. And I think that everybody feeling like they belong and that Lindbergh means something, that being a flyer means something, It keeps bringing alum back to games, and it brings us all together and all trying to work towards the same goal of making sure that we have students who are succeeding.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Randleman.
There are so many things that I love about Lindbergh. From the teachers, I think that's the number one. For us, it was the ELL, and just how they took children who really didn't know much, and now they're excellent. They're just doing great. We personally really love the strings program. We've seen our children develop and just become amazing. So there's a lot of other stuff. I can't even number them all, but I am truly thankful for this district as a whole. I know everyone is striving towards that excellence in education.
Okay, Ms. Miller.
I feel like going last, I just need to be like, yes, check, ditto.
You can do that.
But, so some of the things I'm thinking of, obviously our staff, our teachers, especially during COVID, they just really showed up and they were, initiating new things for virtual learning on the fly, and they did it very well. And, we have a highly invested community, and I think as a district, we really need to, use that to our advantage and help us, continue to improve and move forward. And like some of you guys mentioned, our programming at the high school, and just that constant strive to do better. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, now they're going to give their closing statements, and then I have just a couple of quick announcements after that, trying to give you hope, okay? So we're going to start with you, Ms. Voss, your closing statement.
Okay, I think one of the qualities that I have that would make me really great on the board is that I'm pretty good at bringing people together. I've taken classes to be a certified mediator, so I've learned how to bring people together when there are differences of opinions. But more importantly, why I want to do this job. I've been dancing around education my entire life. I was almost an education major, chose psych instead. In law school, I was a TA. About 7 years out of being a practicing attorney, I took an alternative certification to get certified through DESE, and I have that application filled out in a drawer with the $50 check because I wanted to be a high school English teacher. And I didn't send it in because my firm gave me the opportunity to work 3 days a week, and I had to sit down and think what's best for my family, and I stayed with the firm at that point. And so even now, though, at my law firm, I've moved out of litigation into a role where part of my job is educating attorneys. I have always had this drive to make sure that there's quality education and that people can learn everything they need to know to succeed. And I feel like that maybe all of my experiences where I got so close to being a teacher but backed away, maybe that led me to today so that I could be here in this role, serving the education that way. And I hope to get your vote on April 5th.
Ms. Clay.
I would again like to end tonight's forum by talking about unity. I think this really sets me apart from the other candidates. It's been something that I've really been working on and really have been talking to community members about. We are a divided district right now. We really need to come together as a district. I believe the tone of the district comes from the top, and our board needs to set an example for unity. When elected to the board, I will work to unite our district. I understand the need for compromise and am willing to listen to opinions from all stakeholders, and I'm willing to change my own opinion. We all have our own opinions, but I think it's really important to be willing to listen to others and get all the input you can and all the data you can. And if you need to change your opinion, I think it's important to be able to do that. I think that's the sign of a real leader, to admit when you were wrong and that you're willing to change and admit that you made a mistake. I will put students first when making all of my decisions. I'll be fiscally responsible to the taxpayers of our district, and I will work for increased transparency and accountability. I believe parents should be a partner in their child's education, and that we need to listen and put great weight on parents' concerns. I'll strive to bring back academic excellence in our school district, And I really hope you all vote for me on April 5th. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Miller.
So I'm the type of person that I analyze data. I think things through very thoroughly. I reflect, which sometimes I think is a weakness because I get in my own head and can't get past it. But I will continue to seek continuous improvement for myself and for the district and be open to new ideas and listening. My time on the board has given me the experience to continue to move our district forward, and I believe my professional experience gives me that usable knowledge as well. I am proud to be a part of Lindbergh. We are a top district, and other districts come to us and look to us as an example, and the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education in Missouri does as well. So I just want to say that, Lindbergh is constantly researching, evaluating, and making changes when needed, and looking ahead and planning for the education of students so that they are prepared for whatever future path they choose. I've greatly enjoyed my time on the board and valued it. I've learned a lot, personally and professionally, and I hope that on April 5th, you will use one of your 2 votes to vote for Jennifer Miller. Thank you.
Thank you. Finally, Mr. Randleman.
Thank you. By now you have heard many concerns addressed by the candidates. You have also heard my thoughts on structured literacy and the importance of getting back on the path of educational excellence. This election is certainly one of the most important I can recall because it boils down to one very simple question, and that is, where do we draw the line between parents versus school responsibility? The administration believes that it is up to them to provide our children with what they deem as social emotional support, principles, empathy, moral values, intersectionality, lenses, and identity through books to read with topics such as gender and sexual orientation. When you hear terms like teaching the whole student, this is part of what that means. Let me tell you what will happen if we allow the administration to parent on these topics. We will lose our diversity, and instead we will raise a generation of children who will think in one way. We will lose our unique individuality and freedom of conscience. I know that the community loves Lindbergh Schools, and we wish to see them go back to focus on academics and be an excellent school district we have known them to be. By focusing on the literacy, focusing on math, bringing back interventions for those students who struggle, and making sure we maximize student potential by restoring challenge and honor classes, I know we can get back to that place. We need more diverse voices on the board. We need more say as parents. If you feel, as I do, that more transparency on what is being taught is required, that boundaries are needed, that it is for the parents to parent and for the district to teach, then I ask for your vote because we need voices of the parents and community on the board for the future of our children and for that of our school district. Finally, as an immigrant, I would kindly like to end with wishes that God bless America and that I am grateful for you all listening and being here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's give them all a round of applause. It isn't easy, is it? It isn't easy. Okay. Thank you. And again, thank you for participating and participating seriously. And thank you to all of you for making this a successful event. I hope that you feel as if your concerns and questions have been respected and asked. And we got through a lot of things tonight. It's possible to do this in a civil and thoughtful and constructive way. It's possible to do it, and we need to continue to do it at every level of government and community that we have. Thank you to our hosts for inviting us. I think this is the first time the League has done a forum here. We sure hope we'll be asked back. And I want to thank the volunteers from the League, if you'll just hold up your hands. And if you found this forum to be useful, and I hope you did, think about joining us by becoming a member of the League. This is what the League is working for, and our country needs it desperately, desperately at every level. And so we've got material on that as we work at every level of government to make it better. From registering voters to educating voters to trying to design discussion forums where we can have a civil serious discussion to all kinds of things. Now, the polls are going to be open on April 5th from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. I want everybody in this audience, because, you know, sometimes municipal and local elections are low turnout elections. I've looked at the numbers in this district. So I want each of you to take responsibility for finding 5 people who are registered to vote. It's too late to register now, as of March the 9th, and make sure they do it. And they need not only to go to vote, they need to know what they're doing. And so, we have some good resources for that. If you want nonpartisan and fair and balanced information, go to something called Vote 411. We've got some stuff back there. And you'll see the voter's guide that comes out in paper and it comes out online. You know who does that? The League of Women Voters. We do all of the content for 6 counties and the city of St. Louis. So we have over 860 candidates, over 100 ballot issues this time around. And we hope that you will do that. It's going to be online in the next several days, middle of probably by the weekend. And the St. Louis Post-Dispatch also publishes it. And we carry it to every library, every community center that we can. And so please encourage people to use that as a way to get information. Now, some of the polling places have changed. So not a lot of them, and I didn't have time to look at yours. But make sure you know what your polling place is. You should get a postcard from your Board of Elections. You can also look on the Board of Elections site, just type in your address. And by the way, I forgot to tell you that if you look at the voter's guide, Vote 411, what you do is you put in your address, it pops up just your ballot, everything that's on your ballot, with information about the candidates and their answers to questions, as well as ballot issues. And we have 4 charter amendments for the county that are really serious. We try to explain them in real English and do the pros and cons of both. So please look at those, but find out where your polling place is. On election day, if you have any difficulties, you can call the League of Women Voters. You can look us up, take our number back there. You can call the Board of Elections. We are also involved in something called the Missouri Voter Protection Group for the state of Missouri. So if you have any difficulty, if they lost your registration or whatever it is. And remember that the county now says that you can go to any polling place. So I mentioned the other because people like to go to their own polling place. But remember, they got those new machines where you can go to any polling place and vote. But if you have any difficulty with any of these things, you call, and there will be a sign outside your polling places that here's the number of the Missouri Voter Protection. We have lawyers and everybody lined up to help everybody to make sure that everybody votes on election day. So I thank you very much, and I'm sure the candidates will answer your questions. Thank you very much for asking us.